ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this 8th EU-China Forum organized by the CEIBS and the EU-China Business Association. My name is Ivan Hodač. I'm the former Secretary General of ASEA and also founder and president of the supervisory board of the Aspen Institute. Before we start, also, I would like to acknowledge some people whom we have with us and who will in one way or another afterwards address the audience or participate in the debate. First of all, it is President Wang Hong. She is in China. So she will speak from China. Chairman Joachim Hackma, who is the chairman of the EU-China Business Association. Minister Wang Hongjian, welcome, Minister. Professor Pascal Lamy, distinguished professor at the CEIBS, former Director General of WTO, and many other posts, important posts that you held. Welcome, Pascal. Dean Ding Yun, and Ding is also a vice president of the CEIBS, so welcome. And last but not least, former Belgian ambassador to China, Mr. Patrick Nys. Patrick Nys is with us also from China. You will realize that the forum is kind of running double way, which means it's partly in Shanghai in the school and partly here, so we have to take care of it. I have already mentioned that the forum is organized by the CEIBS on CEIBS, as some call it, and the EU-China Association of Business. Or Business Association, and CEIBS is a #1 business school in Asia. Most of you know it. It has been established in 1994, and very quickly I would like to mention a person who has been at the beginning of the school, has been one of the founders, one of the thinkers behind the school, Marco Petriccione, whom you know and who has recently died. So I think we should not forget his role in it. The CEIBS is ranked among first 5, the last year's business schools in the world. As I said, #1 in Asia. Excellent school with campuses in Shanghai, where it started, and in Beijing, Shenzhen, Accra, and in Zurich. We will have with us also we have with us the persons from Zurich here at the forum. This forum exists since 2012. As I have said, we had 8 of these forums. There are a number of other forums that are not that the school is organizing. And it clearly shows that the school is a platform for a dialogue, platform for a discussion. The forum today will be about decarbonization and cooperation between EU and China. We will, of course, talk also about other countries, but the principle that should be involved in this effort, but the principal topic is the decarbonization and the cooperation between EU and China. I will now, before we start the formal speeches, I would like to play, or I would like the technicians to play us a very short video about the school. Please, can I have the video? much. The school is extremely impressive. The ones of you who were not there should be there. I have visited the school a number of times, and I'm extremely impressed what the CEIBS is doing, not only in China, but also in other parts of the world. And the cooperation which we have with Europe, and it's natural because at the beginning it was established by Europe, by the EU and China, so is something outstanding. We will have now a number of welcome speeches, and I will first ask the CEIBS President Wang Hong to give her speech. She will speak, I understand, in Chinese and from Shanghai. President.
Dear Professor Pascal Lamy, Chairman Jochen Hackmann, and Professor Nies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the CEIBS Insights, the 8th Europe Forum 2022, organized by the China-Europe International Business School. First of all, I would like to extend my special thanks to the co-organizer, the EU-China Business Association, for its great support to this forum. Today, visionary people in the field of environmental protection from China and Europe meet here to discuss how to address global climate change. This is not only a challenge on the philosophical and practical level, but also an opportunity for mankind. On the philosophical level, the international community is divided on the root cause of climate change. On the practical level, I think you have already seen in the past summer, China and much of the world grappled with extreme weather. A temperature exceeded 40 degrees Celsius. Global warming has already become a daunting challenge for everyone. We have also seen that the geopolitical and regional conflicts have given rise to the shortage of energy. Nevertheless, I prefer to see the silver lining behind the cloud. In September 2020, the Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged at the UN General Assembly China's commitment to striving to have carbon dioxide emissions peak before 2030 and to achieve carbon neutrality before 2060, jointly referred to as the dual carbon goals. To achieve these goals, it requires the assurance of technology and strategy. It requires joint efforts made by all the entrepreneurs in the world. I believe that with the international community, especially China and the EU, a green world advocating sustainable development is just around the corner. As we can see, China has been adjusting its industrial structure and optimizing its energy structure in recent years. In accordance with such a strategy, the market mechanism has been established through the platform, and continuous efforts are needed in this regard. In the fields such as energy storage, electric vehicle, and other related sectors, we're approaching and reaching the world top level. At the same time, we propose that green technology, green finance, green environmental protection industry, and a market platform should be established. And carbon trading market is also booming. We also see that by 2022, China's afforestation will have reached an unprecedented level in the world at around 25%. Among them, carbon dioxide emissions per unit of GDP have dropped by 34% cumulatively compared to a decade ago. In fact, the change of industry and the continuous improvement of technology have raised our demand for dual carbon development. The installed capacity of green power, such as solar energy, wind power, photovoltaic power generation, and the number of sales of renewable energy vehicles, as you can see, are now developing faster. Because among the 1.4 billion people, more than 400 million are middle class. In the next 30 years, the total scale of dual carbon investment in China will exceed 10 billion RMB. China is a market with considerable potential, and it has great purchasing power. Chinese people's hard-working savings and increased purchasing power are a very important foundation for a thriving market. As a pioneer in the world of carbon neutrality, the European Union has the advantages in carbon reduction technologies. So it is always in the forefront of the world in low carbon technology innovation, such as renewable energy and sustainable agriculture and hydrogen energy. We have also noticed that the European climate law has written carbon neutrality into law by 2050, according to the EU's Next Generation Recovery Plan. The EU budget for fiscal years 2021 to 2027 will reach nearly 2 trillion, with at least 37% of it going to the green transformation of the economy. Of course, this is still a big challenge. And achieving carbon neutrality is a systemic change that requires global cooperation in many aspects. China and the EU have a wide scope for cooperation in various aspects, such as carbon neutrality, global environmental governance, energy transition, green technology, and R&D. All of you here are expert practitioners, advocates, and promoters. And we believe that both sides will further deepen our cooperation and go to a net zero future together. As an important platform for cooperation and economic and cultural exchange between China and Europe, just as the President has introduced us, CEIBS has always attached great importance to the China depth and the global breadth, to China-Europe economic and trade and cultural and business exchanges, to the sharing of the China story, Europe story, and the global cases. At the same time, we pay great attention to the dissemination and the creation of knowledge, and we take social responsibility as an important element of our school. At the same time, to become a respectable business school requires cultivating social responsibility in our students. We have been releasing ESG white papers continuously every year since 2017 and have incorporated the education of social responsibility into the development strategy of the school. CEIBS professors are from all over the world, professors and PhDs from famous universities in Europe and North America meeting here at our school. The school has more than 80 full-time professors, more than 100 including very respected professors like Professor Lamy, more than 100 visiting professors. We have nearly 200 professors here, all of whom are dedicated to promoting exchanges between China and Europe. We have professors who are also working on dual carbon goals and making active proposals. At the same time, we at CEIBS actively advocate alumni companies to carry out dual carbon initiatives. According to a survey last year, CEIBS has 26,000 alumni in 91 countries and regions around the world. Among the business schools in the world, the moderator mentioned earlier that we are the first in Asia, and among the top business schools in the world, the average score of 7 dimensions of social responsibility, corporate development, technological revolution, etc., is higher than the average of Chinese Asia listed companies. We, CEIBS, are committed to China-Europe exchanges, which is also an important part of our strategy. We want to work together with everyone. on the business school platform for the future to promote the progress and development of human society and the green economy. The CEIBS Europe Forum is a very important platform which has become a high-end platform for exchanges between the Chinese and the European business elites over the past 10 years. I'm very glad to be able to meet friends, experts, and entrepreneurs today at the Brussels site, as well as in Shanghai, to discuss how to create a net zero future together. We hope that today's discussion and exploration can contribute our wisdom and forward-looking suggestions to deepen the bilateral relationship and the practical cooperation between China and Europe, and provide advice on low-carbon transition development, as well as to the friendship and economic trade and the cultural exchanges between China and Europe, to the exchange of business schools and the training of global entrepreneurs and elites, as well as new cooperation platforms. We can work together to write a new chapter. Finally, I would like to express my sincere thanks to all the experts and entrepreneurs, to the co-organizers, and to the media for their support. And I wish you all good health, success, and happiness. I wish this forum a great success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Wang, for this opening speech and for underlining again the role that CEIBS can play in this dialogue between Europe and China, and not only between Europe and China, between China and basically the rest of the world, and that's one of the roles of the CEIBS. I would like now to ask Jochen Hackma. I'm sorry, I have been Jochen Hackma, who is the chairman of the EU-China Business Association, as I have mentioned before, to deliver your remarks. Jochen, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to share with you that we are always looking at the time before Corona and the time after Corona, and we hope that this is now what is happening maybe after today. First of all, on behalf of the EU-China Business Association, we also welcome you all to the 8th Europe Forum organized by the Chinese Europe Business Association, and also with the CEIBS. And CEIBS is very dear to my heart because many years ago, when I was Consul General in Shanghai, when it was just erected, I had the honor to deliver a speech there, and it's indeed an extremely valuable and very well regarded institute on a very high level. Wang told us it's one of the top 5 international universities. So we are very also pleased that this is in Shanghai and we have such a good cooperation within the European Union. It's also good to see many old friends, because of COVID, we haven't seen each other into the face other than digital. So this is a totally different experience, I think, for all of us, finally to meet physically. We have the EU and China have a long-standing cooperation on climate change and have agreed to further steps to join efforts. More than ever, both sides need each other. Let me say a few words about the trade and investment, because I think it gives a good background to what is going to happen in the near future between China and the European Union. China surpassed the United States, as you might know, to be the EU's largest trading partner in 2020 and 2021, thanks to strong demand during the coronavirus pandemic. The EU trade in goods with China was worth 588 billion in 2020 and 695 billion in 2021, according to Eurostat, the European Commission statistics database. Speaking about EU investments in China, for the first half 2022, EU investment in China went up by 15%. In 2021, The European investments from the European Union and China also slightly increased from 8.5 billion euro to 8.6 billion, so a very, very slight increase, but still an increase. Speaking about Chinese investments into the European Union, it's also important to note that, we leave the UK out, to be correct. This remained in its multi-year downward trajectory still. Last year, completed Chinese FDI in Europe increased from 6.5 billion euro in 2020 to about 9 billion in 2021. Still, 21 was the second lowest year for Chinese investments in Europe since 2013. The Netherlands actually, and I'm very proud of it, of course, received most of Chinese investments, followed by Germany, France, and the UK. Accounted for the Germany, France, and the UK accounted for about 39% of the total Chinese investment. The share of China state-owned investors fell to a 20-year low in Europe. SOE investment was down 10% compared to 2020. Important to mention also that the SOE investment mostly invested in energy and infrastructure, particularly in Southern Europe, but also consumer products and automotive were the top sectors. Activity in automotive was driven by Chinese greenfield investments in electrical vehicles, the EV batteries. Well, we are all now flooded by many Chinese car manufacturers. And we all know that for so many years already, China is number one in wind energy and also in exporting wind energy, in sun energy and almost also exporting sun energy, and also in the battery field. So this is a very, very important also for Europe. And therefore, I would really, and we plead as the European China Business Association for a close cooperation, in the decarbonization drive we will have all together, and which is very, very important. Finally, the EUCBA is the Association of Bilateral China Business Association aiming at promoting the economic and trade relation between the European Union and China. Today, we have about 20 member associations and represent more than 20,000 European and Chinese companies, as well European investors in China as Chinese investors working together with European companies in Europe. In normal non-COVID times, we receive always high-level Chinese delegation, introduce them to our member companies, and also we organize high-level meetings between Europe and Chinese authorities and companies. The EU-China Business Association has just been, that's news, selected by the European Commission as an official partner of the next phase of the EU SME Center in China, which helps European SMEs grow on the Chinese market. Well, no further ado, there's a very, very important line of speakers today, and I hope that we will draw some conclusions. And I think that the most important is that we will conclude that it's very, very important for Europe and for the European Union and for China to work together on this decarbonization drive. And I think there are many, many very interesting items where we can flourish and we can work together. Thank you very much. Have a very good seminar and very good discussions.
Yes, thank you very much, Jeroen. Thank you for this excellent overview about the relation between China and the EU, and also importance of the seminar and the possibility and the opportunities we are having in this during the seminar. I would like now to ask Minister Wang Hongjian, who is the Chargé d'Affaires ad interim at the mission of the People's Republic of China at the EU, to deliver his welcoming speech. Minister, the floor is yours.
President Wang, Hackman 会长，拉米先生，丁远先生，侯达先生 ，distinguished guests. It gives me great pleasure to attend the 8th Europe Forum, and I would like to congratulate on a successful convening of the forum and send my best greetings to all the delegates. The theme of this forum is China-Europe cooperation and decarbonization. This is a highly relevant topic. This summer, China and Europe have both suffered rare climate disasters in history. The persistent heat and drought not only seriously affected people's lives, but also led to serious secondary disasters such as raging mountain fires and drying up rivers, which led to reduced food production and electricity shortages. Climate change has turned from a future challenge to a real threat. And the world is also facing multiple challenges such as military conflicts, economic slowdown, inflation, energy shortage, food shortage, and unstable supply chains, which have led to a swing back in some countries' policies to address climate change. Facing the challenge of global climate change, China has shown its responsibility and ambition by striving to achieve the dual carbon goal of achieving carbon peak by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. To achieve this goal, China will need to make extremely difficult efforts. But as President Xi Jinping has correctly pointed out, China is obliged to do and do well whatever is good for all mankind. China and Europe share similar interests in green transformation and have great potential in this field. During the China-EU Leaders Summit meeting in April this year, President Xi Jinping pointed out that China and Europe should practice true multilateralism and continue to lead the global cooperation on climate change and biodiversity. The China-EU high-level dialogue on environment and climate has been held 3 times. The two sides should make full use of the high-level dialogue platform and build a multi-stakeholder, multi-level, and multi-form of green cooperation. The two sides can also actively promote third-party green cooperation, especially supporting third-party developing countries in their transition from high-carbon fossil energy to low-carbon, clean and efficient renewable energy. Green cooperation is an important part of China-EU relations, and a healthy and stable China-EU relationship indispensable to make the green cooperation bigger and stronger. It is important to do the following. First, we must adhere to the correct positioning of the China-EU relations in the 47 years of China-Europe relations. Though the two sides have different systems, this does not prevent us from seeking common ground while resolving differences and achieving win-win cooperation. The cooperation between China and EU in such areas as market for carbon trading and sustainable finance also proves this. China and Europe are not partners, not rivals, and the cooperation far outweigh competition. China and Europe should adhere to the positioning of comprehensive strategic partnership to ensure the stability and sustainability of China-EU green cooperation. Secondly, we need to have a rational understanding of the responsibility for climate change. China and EU are at different stages of development, and China is still a developing economy, but it has always taken the initiative to assume international responsibility in line with its national circumstances. We should hold the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, equity, and the respective capabilities while focusing on pragmatic actions, keeping our promises, and promoting the implementation of initiatives to deal with climate change. Third, we must maintain the stability and consistency of our climate policy. In the face of complex and turbulent international situation, China has maintained its strategic determination to cope with climate change and has continued to promote the dual carbon process in accordance with its established goals, providing stability for the world. However, China's policies and development are also subject to interference from external factors from time to time. We hope that the EU and the international community can maintain a stable and coherent climate policy, prevent various forms of protectionism, provide stable expectations for green cooperation, and inject a sustainable momentum into global climate governance. Fourth, we should maintain mutual trust in addressing climate change. Green topics have received worldwide attention, and the response to climate change is related to the future of mankind. We shall be wary of politicizing green issues or using them as political tools, and avoid looking at these technical issues from the perspective of geopolitical competition. Green cooperation cannot be promoted in vacuum, and it depends upon good political mutual trust. Geopolitical confrontation And unconditional cooperation will not happen and cannot happen at the same time. China and Europe should move towards each other, remove resistance, and create a good political environment of mutual trust and a fair, open, and shared economic and trading investment environment for green cooperation. Fifth, we should properly deal with the differences in green regulation. China and EU are at different stages of development and cannot be exactly on the same page of low-carbon green development. So differences and even conflicts in green regulations are just inevitable. The two sides should properly deal with such differences, especially for the regulatory initiatives with spillover effects. Both sides should strengthen policy communication and the rule coordination to avoid unilateral action. I'm confident that China and EU cooperation in green field has great potential. The Chinese mission to the EU is willing to continue to play a role as a bridge in promoting China-EU green cooperation. I would like to wish the forum a great success.
Yes, thank you, Minister, and thank you for stressing the need to continue and to develop the cooperation between China and the EU. And the green field, the decarbonization, and other issues are extremely important subjects. So thank you very much again for your remarks. We now have the pleasure of asking Pascal Lamy, as I mentioned, distinguished professor at the CEIBS, former Director General of WTO, former Commissioner for Trade, to deliver a keynote speech on the subject EU and China decarbonization together. Pascal, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning or good afternoon. Good to be back with you, including my online students in the CEIBS, which I must say I'm very eager to meet physically as soon as possible. Now, let me follow up on what Minister Wang just said on this topic of how can the EU and China be both better at decarbonizing their economic systems. We all know, and I don't need to insist on that, that decarbonization has become and will remain for the times to come the overarching main endeavor of humanity, given the catastrophic impact of climate change. So both EU and China have to succeed for themselves, but also for the rest of the world. Should they? Can they do it better as partners? Now, I'll try to answer this question in making 2 points. The first one is that we obviously start from very different situations, whether we look at EU or China. And the second one is that notwithstanding these differences, there are, in my view, many areas where a closer, stronger cooperation between EU and China would be beneficial. So, in a nutshell, while EU and China are very different CO2-wise, there is a large scope for more cooperation. Now, let me start with what I see as the differences so that we know where we start from. And on this, we have to call a spade a spade. Our situations are very different, whatever aspect of decarbonization we look at. Starting, of course, with the emission levels, which are much larger in China than in Europe. Europe, roughly 3.2 gigatons a year. China, roughly 14 gigatons a year. China is roughly 27% of global emissions, EU is 9% of global emissions. Even if you look at emissions per head, which is also a relevant indicator, the EU is roughly emitting today 8.6 tons per head, whereas China, with a much larger population, is around 9.7. We're also in a very different situation if we look at emission trends, with China increasing its emissions. They've been growing rapidly for the last 30 years. They've multiplied by 4 during this period. During the same period, EU has decreased its emissions by 35%. Another area where we differ is our energy mix. China still relies very heavily on coal, which, as we know, is the highest source of CO2 emissions among fossil fuels, roughly 70% of energy production in China. This proportion in the EU is now down to 17%. Another difference in the relative importance of economic sectors in our economies, industry, services, agriculture. China still has a much higher proportion in industry than the European Union, and we all know that industry is emitting more than services. Now, if you look at agriculture, we also have quite a big difference, but this side, with a plus on the Chinese side, the Chinese agricultural sector still makes of China a carbon sink, so a positive for absorption of carbon emissions, whereas the EU is now far from that and is only very slowly starting to address this issue. Before last area where we have differences on our trajectory to zero carbon, 2050 for the EU, 2060 for China. If you look at this 2030 benchmark, which was mentioned previously, the EU intends to be at minus 55%, whereas 2030 is probably the time of China's peak of emissions. Our emissions peaked 30 years ago. Chinese emissions are likely to peak in the next decade. And finally, among the differences, we also have to look at CO2 pricing. As we all know, CO2 pricing is the main policy tool in order to internalize the negative externalities of climate CO2 emissions. On this, we have 2 major differences. First one is on the price. Chinese price of carbon today, roughly €8 a ton. EU price of carbon today, roughly €85 a ton. And our EU carbon pricing has a much larger scope than China, which of course started only in 2021, and which has so far limited its carbon pricing scope to the power generation sector. So, major differences, which we have to acknowledge for a frank and fruitful dialogue. Yet, and this is my second point, in spite, and maybe because of these differences, more cooperation between EU and China would probably bring benefits, and I see these benefits in 6 areas: ETS, trade, tech, finance, ocean, and forests. And let me briefly address each of these 6 areas where I believe we could do better together. Starting with the ETS, the emission trading system, which was mentioned by President Wang Hong, which is the way we both have decided to price carbon. And this is a major commonality between EU and China in using this policy tool, which, for instance, we do not have with the US. As we all know, the Chinese ETS system has been inspired by the EU, and there has been before China started in 2021, quite a lot of technical cooperation between EU and China to design and to devise the emission trading system. So more to come as China progressively increases the scope of its pricing carbon system. And on this, I think we have a lot of experience sharing to do. Not least because we in the European Union, we did not get everything right. We don't yet have everything right. And we have to learn from our mistakes in order to help China not to step in the same traps as we did since we started this system. Second one, of course, of these sensitive areas is trade. As you know, Europe Jacques Delors, which is the Brussels incarnation of the Jacques Delors think tanks, published very early at the beginning of 2020 a template for a CBAM, a European carbon border adjustment. We know for sure that this has raised some eyebrows on the Chinese side, and this is an issue which EU and China keep discussing. My own view, for what's worth, is that we can converge on this. First, on the fact that given the relative high price of carbon in the EU, we need some sort of carbon border adjustment at the border to avoid CO2 leaks from Europe to other places, including China. And second, given the sectors that this system will cover, which is mostly electricity, cement, fertilizers, aluminium and steel, which is the scope for the moment, waiting for the final decision of the Council of Ministers and the Parliament. China is only concerned by two of these sectors, steel and aluminium. And the calculations we have, and which I think are shared on the Chinese side, is that this is a very tiny proportion of EU-China trade, which is running to the tune of 350 billion a year. These two sectors roughly represent 1 billion, so that a CBAM, which would increase in 25, 26, 27, would probably represent 0.1% of the value of EU-China trade, assuming China would export steel and aluminum with a high carbon footprint. And the reality, I believe, is that we know for sure that China produces sometimes in some plants steel and aluminum, the carbon footprint of which is better than the European average one. And this is a reality which we need to factor in which case China would benefit from a comparative advantage on the European market as compared to other exporters with a higher carbon footprint. So in some ways, this CBAM is good news for China's competitiveness on the European market, provided, of course, China ships to the EU its green steel and aluminium, which I do recognize might imply that they will ship browner aluminium and steel elsewhere, which is a global problem. Number three, which I see as a major topic for cooperation and enhancing what we already do, is technology. And I'm thinking more precisely in three areas where we need more technology to try and overshoot the 1.5 degree. Number one is carbon capture and storage, which was already mentioned this morning. We know that there are possibilities of being much better thanks to innovation and technological progress in either storing or capturing carbon at the source of emissions. The second one is geoengineering, which is a much more debated technology, including the modification of the impact of solar radiation on the world atmosphere. And I'm working on that with a global commission, which is called the Climate Overshoot Commission, with a number of old luminaries, silverbacks like me. including, by the way, a very talented and internationally recognized Chinese academic, Shui Lan from Tsinghua University. And the third area, of course, is nuclear energy, where both EU and China have a track record that allows them to be better at solving a number of problems in terms of safety of power plants, in terms of storage, or in terms of waste. Another area where I think there is a scope for more Chinese-Europe cooperation is finance. We know that there is a massive gap between North and South in terms of finance availability to address mitigation and adaptation. Talking, of course, about the 100 billion unfulfilled pledge by developed countries. But we also know that that's only a very small part of what is necessary for developing countries to move more quickly to renewables. And I think on this, there are areas where we could do better. For instance, in Africa, in financing, and why not together, although this might seem a bit of a weird idea, financing together hydropower in Africa. The cost of investment in hydropower is very important. The long-term benefits are much more important, but for the moment, Africa bumps into a financial problem which we might help to solve. And while on the finance side, I also believe that most of what is needed at the end of the day will come from private finance. And on this, what is going on at world level for the taxonomy, and notably with this new IASB, International Sustainability Standard Board, which was born last year, and the purpose of which is to provide a level playing field on financial markets in order to properly distinguish between what is green and what is less green in finance. One more topic where I think EU and China will benefit from a common approach. Before last area, where I think we could work better to address the problems of decarbonization is oceans. We know that the degradation of oceans is one of the main challenges which we have to face environmentally, whether it's about carbon or biodiversity. The ocean is an enormous sink for carbon, and its ability to absorb carbon is endangered by its degradation. This is an area where EU and China probably could do more. We both have a very large ocean implication, starting with a topic which is dear to my heart, which is the protection of the Antarctic. I happen to co-lead a global coalition, the purpose of which is to protect the Southern Ocean that's around the Antarctic continent from fishing. And to be frank, we still need China to help us on this. Let me also mention two short-term opportunities which we have in this area, which is the next COP Biodiversity 15, which will take place in Montreal under the chair of China, and also what remains to be done on the famous BBNG, the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty, the negotiation session of which did not conclude in July, unfortunately, but where I think EU and China could strive together to find a compromise by the end of this year. Finally, for both of us, deforestation is a clear priority. It is, reforestation is a part of the solution to decarbonization. And now that China has joined the Glasgow Pledge to reverse deforestation by 2030, we are now on the same track, and we probably could do better together in addressing deforestation in Africa, in Southeast Asia, and in Latin America. So these are a few concrete suggestions and proposals from my side. Let me conclude with two short remarks. The first one, which follows on what Minister Wang said, is that we know for sure that we are in a very tense, hard, antagonistic international situation following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That's the way we Europeans call this war. We know that this will have many geopolitical consequences that risk and probably will restrain the scope for international cooperation in a number of areas. I think both EU and China should make sure that this does not shrink the corridor of cooperation which we have on decarbonization, and that's a firm hope which I express and which I hope is shared on the Chinese side. But let's be realistic. This will not be easy in the times to come. Final and second concluding remark, I think both sides have to resist the temptation to trade short-term for long-term or long-term for short-term. The temptation to postpone the major efforts which we have to do because of the present energy crisis caused by Russia must be resisted. We may be tempted to slow the transition to renewable energy to address legitimate short-term concerns about energy security or availability, given the huge rise in prices. I think, nevertheless, EU and China should maintain our long-term decarbonizing trajectories, keeping our respective credibility in this domain is, in my view, essential to bring more countries, starting with the US, the second large CO2 emitter, on board of decarbonization. The Biden administration now seems to be serious about this, following the climate package that was pushed through Congress this summer. One of the very few good news we've had recently. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pascal, for this extremely comprehensive but rather short overview of the differences and also of the similarities we have between EU and China. And the 6 areas that you have mentioned for cooperation were extremely important and right on the point. I have a question that is slightly different. We are here with the CEIBS. What should be a role of an institute like CEIBS? What should be a role of these institutes in this cooperation, bringing the cooperation more and more together? Is it just a platform? Can they do something else? And how can we bring the United States, which you have mentioned at the end, into this mix?
Well, CEIBS is a EU-China initiative, which was born from a conversation I attended between the then President of the European Commission, Jacques Delors, and Chairman Deng Xiaoping in 1986. And Delors at the time made a suggestion for working more with China, saying, well, why don't we try to educate you a bit on business practices? And Deng Xiaoping said, yeah, that's a good idea, because at the time he was really trying to move China in this direction. I'm not commenting on what's happening today. And I inevitably have a sort of tenderness for the CEIBS, which is why when Dean asked me to join the faculty as a professor a few years ago, I wholeheartedly accepted. And my experience with CEIBS has been great because I tried to teach a few things, but I also learned a lot of things. And, at my advanced age, learning every day is a formidable privilege. So, to answer your question, CEIBS is now a major academic body with quite a large global outreach. And I think this is the way CEIBS can use. There are lots of good brains, lots of them in this faculty, mostly, of course, Chinese ones. They, for the moment, share a view that China should go more global, which is a view I share, and that this necessitates a number of topics to be addressed technically with experts, not just with Sunday speeches of, China and Europe could work better. This has to go into details, and I think in a number of areas, and of course, I would privilege, as I have done in my teaching every year, at the end of the year until 2019, physically, with the CEIBS, the trade, economy, technology, environment nexus. So these are, I think, the 4 areas where by CEIBS working to put on the table ideas, and we know that the Chinese leadership, at least so far, had always very carefully looked at what big Chinese academic institutions have tabled. I think this is the way to go, and I'm sure that if that's the spirit, which I think will remain, then EU is really ready to reciprocate.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your remarks. It's always a pleasure to listen to you, Pascal. You have always something to add, more than many other people. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for your invitation.
We have now the pleasure to welcome through the video the new president of CEIBS, new European president of CEIBS, who is Dominique Tourin. Dominique Tourin has been appointed very recently, a few days ago, but he is now in Lausanne, and he will deliver a short speech to this audience. Dominique, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. And Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to be with you, although virtually, of course, on this very important topic. As you mentioned, I've been appointed as a new co-president of CEIBS about a few days ago, and I'm happy to work hand in hand with Professor Wang Hong, who is the co-president of CEIBS on the Chinese side. So, although I can't be with you physically, I'm really glad that CEIBS, together with the EU-China Business Association, could take the initiative to organize this 8th forum around a topic which I think is indeed very timely, decarbonization, and the role that both the EU and China can play. It's of course, and it has been mentioned already by previous speakers this morning, it's an urgent topic, an important topic, but the world needs to address in order to ensure the planet well-being. It's not only important for us, our generation, but I think the new generation, our children, grandchildren, and they have major expectation that we address the subject now, since they will inherit the opportunities and the challenges that we and previous generation have created. And of course, as major world economic, technological, and political powers, both China and Europe have a major role to play. I have children and a grandchildren, and what has surprised me is that these people are very impatient. They are impatient to see us, take action. And I think to the question about what can CEIBS play in terms of role, to help on this topic of decarbonization. I would say we have probably three roles to play. One is indeed to create a sense of urgency. And this is certainly the purpose of this forum. That's number one. It's about understanding the challenges, the opportunity ahead of us, to discuss, I think, the existing and potential solution to the problem, although I know it's very, very complex. And third, I think it's to try to accelerate government companies to take the right action in a relatively quick time. So I'm really glad that CEIBS, together with the EU-China Business Association, have taken the initiative to organize this forum on this topic. And together with my colleague and my friend at CEIBS, we are extremely grateful to such distinguished speakers as Minister Wang, Pascal Lamy, and also all the panelists that we will have this morning to share this perspective, since indeed China and EU have much to contribute in creating and finding, sustainable actions to the challenge of decarbonization. So I want to express my sincere thanks and recognition to all of you for being here this morning. And we really appreciate you taking some of your very precious time to share your thoughts today. So I want to thank you all, and I hope I will see many of you soon face-to-face and not virtually. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dominic, and good luck in your new function. We are now coming to the second part of the program, and that's the panel discussion. I will ask now the panelists to join me on the stage, and we will start with Markus Bayer, the Director General of Business Europe. Markus, please. Kurt van de Putte, who is the Kurt van de Putte, who is the Senior Vice President of Battery Recycling Solution Unicorn and Vice President of EU CBA. Hello, nice to see you, Kurt. We have also Zhang Haitao from SAIC Motor Group, who is going to join us from China, from Shanghai. So he will be on the video. He will not be sitting here with us. Guido Giaconi, please join us he is a National Vice President, EU Chamber of Commerce, and founding father of, I believe, In3 Act. And last but not least, Wang Xuan, Assistant Professor of Finance at the CEIBS. We will start by asking each of you, please, to deliver short remarks, 5 minutes, 7 minute max. And as we have said at the beginning, we should try to stick to the main themes, which is what are you doing for the decarbonization, cooperation between EU and China, and the role of the authorities in the first place. So, Markus, the floor is yours.
Well, no, I mean, just first of all, thank you, Ivan and the CEIBS for the invitation. I mean, most of you will know Business Europe. We are basically the representation of business on European level. Our members come from all sectors, from all sizes, so therefore I think we have quite a holistic view on these topics. I mean, we support the goal as an organization of climate neutrality, but of course this comes with enormous challenges, obviously. And it's very clear, of course, there is no alternative to decarbonization. At the same time, of course, we are in a situation where this is specifically tricky. Pascal has talked about the need to keep the long-term track, and we fully agree on this. At the same time, of course, we also need to come over the winter. And we will need to come to the right mix in order to achieve this both. We think that cooperation with China in the field of climate is fundamental. and of course needs to go on also in the difficult situation we have here. This goes for quantitative targets as well, of course, because we'll need to aim for a more and more level playing field. And Pascal has alluded to this. I mean, this means especially we'll need to talk about targets for 2030 and 2050. And this also means implementation measures. And Pascal has also alluded to this when it comes to domestic emission trading systems, where there is one in China, but the scope is very small. There's no absolute cap for emissions, and the price is pretty low. So this is something which needs to be developed. Of course, this cooperation in an ideal world should be flanked by multilateral action, or maybe even by a climate club, which would be our dream. I mean, this would make all kinds of trade restrictions are necessary, but at the same time, let me also underline that as long as we don't have this situation, the European Union is very well advised to keep its measures and necessities on carbon leakage going. So we need protection against carbon leakage, and this is very clear. We can discuss it in more details. As an organization, we have a history to work with China. Of course, we are organizing an EU-China CEOs dialogue once a year. We normally are also the partner of business dialogues when there is summits. And we have published a paper in July on the question China relations engaging with a systemic rival. And we have outlined very much that climate change is one of the key areas that we propose for engagement and cooperation with China. And I mean, I have a list as well, a bit different from Pascal's one. So we think we should cooperate more on the Paris Climate Agreement. We should cooperate on emissions trading. I mean, this is Pascal also mentioned. We should cooperate on environmental standards, and we should cooperate on climate and environment initiatives in the WTO. So this is for the general. I will just, I don't know how long I've been already, Ivan. I will just briefly allude to the concrete questions you have raised. Well, I mean, what we are doing, of course, is we support the overall goal. We try to provide our expertise, but we also want to show the way that we need to come to a path of decarbonization on the one hand, while keeping the European companies and business competitive. I mean, this is very clear. This is one. The debate in our ranks is no longer about the if or the when. It's very much about the how. Which is why we are very engaged in this Fit for 55 debate on a weekly basis. But I mean, I cannot talk about this in detail because I mean, this would fill an hour, but we also try to exchange best practices. So we do this in our working groups, we do it in our committees, and we have a couple of distinguished websites. One is Circulary, the other is Climate Your Business, where we really exchange best practices in order to make sure that we spread the word. On the authorities, I mean, as I said earlier, I mean, it's very much about the mix to keep the thing on track, but also survive the winter. And this means we will need to do it all. We'll need to speed up renewable energy, which is very much about permitting. At the same time, we might also need to fire coal at some stages. We might need to keep nuclear going. And we also might need to have more efforts to explore our proper gas, if we don't get it from elsewhere, as long as we need it. So we are basically standing up for a mix here. Pascal has alluded to the differences on our path and China's path. I don't need to allude to this. I think maybe one thing to mention, and then I'll stop. The rest we can do in the debate. I think a very important point to keep in mind is that we have reduced our emissions already significantly in Europe compared to the growth. But of course, a lot of this was relatively low-hanging fruits. So of course, the path is getting more and more difficult. And the truth is also that a lot of the technologies that will really make the difference, and we do not yet have, And this is for high heat when we talk about steel making. This is about high energy density when we talk about aviation, for instance. The technologies are not yet ready for the market. And this is something where we certainly would need also more cooperation also with the public sector to push the things over the line in order to have these technologies available. I'll stop here. Ivan, I mean, there's more to say, but I do not want to be too long. We can go a bit more in details on where we see the concrete fields of cooperation in the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Markus. And we are going to go indeed deeper into the debate afterwards. I will basically open also the debate to the floor. So if you have any questions to any of the speakers, please keep them after we finish the first round. We are going to open the debate. Good.
Thank you, Ivan. I think I can give a testimonial here of a real industrial company and how we tackle decarbonization. If you look really at a very high scale, decarbonization is moving from a single-use fossil fuel-based natural resources to a multiple-use metal-based natural resources. And there are very important words in those two sentences. The first one is fossil fuel towards metal base, and the second thing is single use to multiple use. And our company, so the company I'm representing is Umicore. We are a Belgian company, globally present, and we make active metal-based materials going into clean energies. And because of these metal bases, we can offer a recycling solution without any quality loss. So a metal is very special in a sense that if you recycle, if you reprocess it, you get 100% of the quality and the functionality back. It's not compared to paper where you have like a small percentage quality loss each time. This is not the case for metals. So that's a unique property. These green technologies that we will need going forward are mainly based on metals nowadays. This is the case for transporting green energy. This is the case for generating green energy. This is the case for storing green energy. Our company is making typically the materials going into batteries for portable electronics, but of course now also for electrical cars. We are making also these materials for energy storage systems. So we are not making these systems, but the key materials. And all of these are based on mainly lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese. So these are a bit strange elements that you never heard of. And now I come right away to one of the key aspects. Decarbonization is about energy transformation, energy transition, and is a global thing. The effects that carbon emissions have on all of us is a global thing, and the solutions that will develop and market and industrialize are global. And in that respect, I would really like to stress that global collaborations are going to be necessary at a regulatory level to create standards, to create common goals, and at industrial level. I have challenged myself the last 5 years to try to find an important development for humanity that can be made, produced, developed in one single region, and I've not found one yet. So if there is somebody around in the room who can enlighten me on one important thing for humanity that one region can do, please raise your hand and help me to find that one. Whether we talk about pharmaceuticals or solutions for green energy or medicines or automotive, all solutions are global nowadays. Resources are spread in different areas. Skills are spread in different areas. Future green energy is on different location than fossil fuels today. And we have to bring that together to come with an industrial solution. So collaboration is key. and whether that is between or with Europe and China, or this is with other regions, I think this is mandatory. And frankly speaking, I believe that the energy transition holds also a unique opportunity for sustainable development and also a global redistribution. Some of the key materials that we will need instead of fossil fuel are in regions that are underdeveloped. And I think it's a task for all of us to help these countries and get value of this huge global project we have in front of us. Now, coming back to decarbonization, as a company, today we have a pivotal role to play, I think, in the green transformation of transportation. Electric cars are simply more efficient than internal combustion cars if it comes to energy usage. So this is the global trend. And whether these electric cars are directly fueled, let's say, with electrons, or they're going to be fuel cell cars because hydrogen has a higher energy density so you can drive longer, it doesn't really matter in a sense, but the electric motors are just more efficient than a combustion engine. And an electric motor doesn't emit CO2. The CO2 is potentially emitted there where electricity is produced. So the focus is changing, and that is important to note. Let's always focus on end-to-end and supply chain scopes of CO2 emission. It's not because the car is not emitting that the supply chain is not emitting. And here I literally raise my hand. The carbon footprint of electrification, of electric cars, is in the battery. It is not in the consumption anymore. So we are moving emission from consumption in internal combustion engines to emissions in making the car, making the battery. Where is all that carbon then going into? It's in making metals, and it's in making active materials. And that's the reason why I said I'm raising my hand. We are a company producing these active materials. We constitute probably for 1/5 of the carbon footprint of a battery. So we have a huge task and responsibility. Our company strategy on decarbonization is straightforward. Internally, the motto is, let's go for zero by 2035. Yes, you hear it well, 2035. What does this mean? Of course, it's our direct emissions, so scope 1. We have to avoid, first of all, avoid. Secondly, replace. We are a metallurgical company. We are using, for instance, still fractions of coke in our processes. This is fossil-based. We have to come up with something else. Hydrogen being used, biomaterials being used, but we have to cut this in the next 10 years or so. And then thirdly, it's of course, these are the direct emissions. Scope 2 is the energy we use. We have a clear objective. The company is growing extremely fast because of this transformation, but all growth projects need to be carbon neutral. So that means that the energy we use for production of materials going into a battery has to be 100% green. We are a global company. We have factories in China, in Korea, in Europe, soon in Northern America. We use green energy wherever we operate. And here I like immediately also to come to what is the authority impact. Although there is an instrument installed in China on the power side, I must say today for us as a company, it's most difficult to prove that we are using green energy in China, even if there is an ETS-alike system. So yes, it is there, but I can tell you the practical application is far from self-evident. And then I right away go to scope 3. So scope 3 of decarbonization, this is everything which is in the supply chain. Supply chain for us is, for instance, mining. Yeah, mining, I see a huge opportunity also for China there. China is today extremely active on the mining side, with collaborations from South America over Africa to Southeast Asia. And I would really call upon Chinese authority to do this in a sustainable way. It's a unique opportunity to basically improve the image that China has on that front of the supply chain.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Kurt. And we are going to come back, especially on the on your suggestion, wish for global regulations, global solutions. This problem is global. There is absolutely no doubt about it. We go to our next panelist, and we will go to Shanghai. Zhang, your remarks, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be so happy and honored to be here because 20 years ago, I took some course in here. So I'm really happy I got invitation from Wang Yuanchang to be here. So my name is Zhang Haidao, come from Chinese largest component supply and Huayu Automobile System Corporation, HASCO for short. And HASCO, emerged from historical opportunity of localization of SAIC and Volkswagen JV. And HASCO goes up with the booming of Chinese automobile industry. And last year, the consolidated revenue almost 20 billion. Okay, and today I'm here. I do not want to talk too much about technology, about decarbonization, because we make everything except glass, tire, and we make all the components, and we have almost 450 plants across the world. So I just want to express some idea. I will raise some questions to maybe Marcus, and you give me some reminding. I will raise questions to you and learn got more information from your side. Carbon peaking and carbon neutrality is the main topic of our humans' response to the climate change globally. And all the people mentioned it's about the future of the mankind. Or for the company, I think it's become inescapable social responsibility company. And SAIC is our main shareholder, and HASCO set up our target for our double carbon purpose. We want to set a target to 2025. We will reach to carbon peaking, which is 5 years ahead of a government plan. That's really, really tough change for us. We make a lot of a roadmap, but so far I just tell you we are all on the paper, and we want to find some approach to do it, but we will try it. I will mention to later. And meanwhile, the requirement of the double carbon is become, I could say, the market rules of international trading. Just take automobile as an example, and major European OEM had put forward the clear requirements of carbon emission. So over the last several years, I had a lot of discussion with Mercedes-Benz, with Volvo, with almost all the companies like BMW and Bosch. Very clearly, we should give them very clearly, the approach how can meet their demand. CDP, okay, carbon disclosure project, should give them this all documents. Then they will give you some SOR. Then you could have plan to participate in the game. Okay, this is really challenging for us. And I could say, the double carbon and double peaking is really become a matter of life and death. Moreover, double carbon requirements cover all the aspects of the company, from raw material, energy to products, from manufacturing, logistics to whole value chain. And we are striving to meet this requirement. I believe it eventually it will really reform the sustainable capability and competency of the company. Over the history, we have a lot of partners, in Europe. I could see we have excellent partnership with almost famous component supply, like Bosch, ZF, Continental, Valeo, everything, GCAN, you name it, we know already. I think we really wish work with this partner, or even more people from Europe to work together in this field. I see great opportunity and space in this field, and HESCO really ready to look forward to go with all the European company and to make some contribution for the decarbonization. So that's my short message. So later maybe I could participate in some discussion. I just mentioned we make a lot of components. For me it's too complicated. I cannot just mention the replacement of the resources. So this is a very initial stage. I think maybe more folks wish to consider the knowledge. How can we really reach to deep decarbonization and negative, carbon negative technology? That's really I want to get some knowledge from maybe Kurt. You are expert in this field. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Zhang. We will come to some of the questions later on. Next, Guido, please be so kind and keep your remarks to strictly 5 minutes.
To be
and the same goes after us for one.
We are out of time. I'm happy to be here on behalf of the European Euro Chamber of Commerce in China. We do represent the European business in China with close to 2,000 members, the biggest multinationals, and half of our members are small, medium enterprises who have been founded 21 years ago. Here, my friend David Cugino was one of the founders, and now President Emeritus of European Chamber. And together of being here today, was my pleasure to come to Brussels to greet David. I live in Beijing. I came back from Beijing 3 weeks ago. I will go back in 3 weeks. And I thought that being here today, coming with the voice of European business in Brussels, discussing this, was important for the sake of mutual understanding and transmitting what's actually happening in China in terms of carbon neutrality. We, on May 25th, European Chamber launched a paper named Carbon Neutrality, the role of European companies in China raised to 2060. So far, is the most comprehensive paper that has been published in carbon neutrality in China, bringing the European experience that our companies have in China, together with the regulation, and our President Butke a few weeks ago delivered it directly to the hands of Premier Li Keqiang. So, many things has been said. China investments in carbon neutrality is going to be huge. The numbers we have estimated, as with my company, can go between 20 and 70 trillion euros over the next 15 years. It's a huge amount of money, and China is focusing on carbon neutrality for sure, for reducing the carbon intensity and the energy intensity, but mainly for developing new industries. Like happened for solar and wind 20 years ago, when Europe opened the market, Germany, Italy, Spain mainly, to Chinese companies that now have 95% of the solar market. Now China is investing mainly for developing new streams. First of all, hydrogen. And hydrogen could play a role in the future energy system, not only in China, but also in the world, also in transportation, and China is investing heavily on that. Unfortunately, the achievement of the double objective in China is not clear yet. Even though the peak 2030 will be achieved, Now China is not focusing on achieving carbon neutrality, is focusing on securing the energy. So energy security is the priority. The European companies in China want to play a role and will play a role to force China to accelerate the pathway towards carbon neutrality. And the actions also from a political standpoint like CBAM will help us also to make the supply chains in China green. What's the major problem of European companies today in China for getting carbon neutrality? The market is not transparent. It's not possible to assess the carbon footprint of the plants unless you are a big multinational able to make a direct PPA with a renewable energy producer. For the rest, the plants and the companies cannot assess their carbon footprint. It means that globally, the corporate level, the companies cannot assess their carbon footprint because of the Chinese lack of transparency of the system. That's where we act as chamber for advocating also the deep transformation of the system and not only the introduction of new technologies that alone cannot solve the problem. Last but not least, and I finish, European companies can accelerate their development of the Chinese market. They must, because China needs not only the technologies, but mainly the expertise. And I guarantee you, the European system, energy European system is much more complicated than the Chinese one. We have half of the energy intensity of China, and we have 1/3 of the carbon intensity of China. So I do really hope that this event will contribute also to streamline communication with our Chinese friends.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Guido, and thank you for sticking to 5 minutes. Wang?
Yeah, so I'll be also short.
Thank you.
So essentially, I think as an organization, CEIBS is playing a role in promoting the decarbonization effort in two aspects. First, on the teaching side, and the second on the research side, right? So specifically on the teaching side, we promote or actually require professors to teach a certain percentage of their core classes related to ESG or decarbonization. On the research side, actually they give fundings specifically to academics like us to do research in this area. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about my research funded by the school in this aspect. So what I learned is, as I'm a professor in finance, so I think a huge area that would promote or help the decarbonization effort is a more integrated financial markets. Right? So Professor Lamy had already mentioned that, but I think that really can get us a long way. So why is that? Okay, it's almost obvious in the sense that it is win-win situation. From the Chinese side, as I mentioned, or the previous guest mentioned, there will be a decarbonization or carbon neutrality by 2060, while China is having the largest emission per head, right? So what it means that this is an ambitious project that needs not only investments into technology, but also financing into these capital-intensive projects. So that means China needs capital. If we only restrict ourselves to the internal capital markets, what it means is the cost of capital will go up, as we see, and then that will actually, decelerate the process of adopting these capital-intensive projects. On the EU side, we know there's a lot of long-term capital, for example, from the pension fund or insurance company, and more ESG-conscious capital due to these, realization that this is happening, right? So if these capital need to put their euro to the maximum marginal value. So for example, in Europe or in China, of course, you should go to China because for every euro, you reduce much more in terms of decarbonization effort. So this kind of complementary will create a win-win dynamics if we make the capital market barrier lower or non-existent, right? So that's I think theoretically is true. But of course, there will be challenges. Through my research, I look at the historical opening of the Chinese bond market since 2017, right? So that creates this opportunity for this capital to flow into China to fund these, really promising high growth decarbonization projects. And we found is that indeed, as China opens and completely opened the bond market for the first time in 2019, most of the investors are from the European pension fund or these long-term investors. And secondly, if you look at the listings of these bonds in Shanghai versus Hong Kong, for example, for the same kind of cash flow or expected cash flow, the ones that were rated highly on the ESG agencies who receive more European capital, they receive a reduction in the cost of capital of almost 30 basis points. So what this means is that there is such a scope of cooperation to be win-win and forming a benevolent cycle in the sense that, okay, now Chinese companies will do more of these green projects because that will lower their cost of capital due to the push from the financial markets from Europe, for example, and then that will, accelerate the process, and the European capital gets their marginal value of per euro higher and a higher yield compared to German bonds, for example, right? So in a sense, I think going forward, there is a lot of room for cooperation, and the Chinese government, to the question, will, in my opinion, even push for more, lower capital, cost of capital internally, and also open up further the financial market to encourage this kind of behavior. And finally, they will work with the European regulatory body to actually make a better taxonomy. For example, they did it last year to make the common taxonomy, and then immediately Chinese banks went to Europe and raised these green bonds in a historical fashion late last year. And that will be a sample for the future, right? So I think going forward, this is a huge room for discussion, and I look forward to more discussion, so I keep it short.
Yes, thank you very much. And we will now go to a short Q&A sessions. We have about 10, maximum 15 minutes. I would like to ask Ambassador Patrick Nace. Patrick, you have been in China for a long time, and you have recently established or founded an organization called EU-China Joint Innovation Center. What is the Innovation Center doing in order to bring the cooperation on decarbonization between China and EU into some kind of reality?
I'm very happy and surprised to be here. I came to China in '97 as Consul General in Shanghai, and now I'm back to Shanghai. This was the beginning of CEIBS, basically. And I'm back here to share on this so important topic, which is the decarbonization. So EU-CGIC has been set up in 2015, and we are actually doing all what we can to stimulate joint innovation between China and Europe. And I can tell you, this is not an easy. This is not easy at all, especially in the present times where the geopolitical pressure becomes quite a deterrent for candidates to joint innovation. But we do it, and we do it on a daily basis by bringing companies together. But there is another facet of me which you didn't mention. I became an organic farmer in Yunnan, and this is my way actually to contribute to this issue in a very daily and practical manner, because I think we need to change basically the way we are producing our food, and having an ambassador in the countryside doing this is some kind of incentive, I hope, to draw the attention on this issue. And then to go into the topic of today, if you allow me. I came recently on the possibility to grant to the peasants carbon bonds which would actually give them a retribution for the carbon they take from the atmosphere and they bring back to the soil. So this would be something which might become interesting to look at from both sides, because Europe is revisiting the common agricultural policy. China is pushing for organic farming, but it's not easy to convince peasants to move from one to the other and give them incentives to do so. So this would be my small contribution to the present panel, and happy to be here and see so many faces.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. Is there anybody who has a question from the audience at this stage? Please, a short one, and you afterwards, short questions, short answers. Please.
I just want to continue. Pascal Lamy mentioned, geopolitics should not shrink the cooperation scope on climate between China and EU. So you all touched on, we have a battery expert here. But if you listen to Ursula von der Leyen last week at the Bled Security Forum in Slovenia, talking about lithium battery, she basically argued, EU should not create dependency on China, saying 10 of the 30 material sourcing China at the moment. So how do you think, how optimistic are you on this front? Geopolitics will not make climate cooperation a victim, a casualty. Thank you.
We will take the questions together because we are running out of time, and you prefer your answers afterwards. Please, can you pass the microphone to the lady behind you there? It's again short question.
So my question is to everybody, individual and organization. Is there a possibility to advocate a joint film diplomacy or film policy to support film communication about the topics that we've been discussing, to invite more people to join, especially the public in the EU and in China, to join in the debate? So that can be a very fast-track initiative to fund. We can call it green melody. So in China, we have main melody, so maybe green melody films to support all the debates.
Thank you very much. There was nobody on this side. No, there in the middle.
Actually, I have a question for Professor Wang. When you mentioned something about ESG investing, my question is, what might be the cooperation for China and EU on the ESG investing to help the decarbonization? For example, what might be the cooperation in the financial market between China and Euro to have a better alignment? It's not only for the policy alignment and others. It means how the financial market can help the ESG can be much better for our world. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. And last question just behind you, please. No, she's not. Last question behind you. Yes.
Thanks. This question is to Mr. Director General of Business Europe. So I read the position paper you mentioned before that you and Business Europe identified standardization as one of the key areas for cooperation with China. And you also mentioned environment standards. It's a bit similar to the first question, how feasible it is in this kind of geopolitical this kind of situation to foster more cooperation with China on standards. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We will come to you at the end. Kurt, the first question.
First question on dependency. I think the industrial reality is different than the political narrative. And I come back to what I mentioned. You have resources in one area, you have a market in another, and you have green energy still somewhere else. The reality today is that Chinese companies invest in Europe, that European companies invest in the US and in China, and vice versa. A lithium-ion battery market is going to be organized regionally. Over time, I do not see big batteries being shipped from one continent to the other. A battery is a ton right now. That's a huge weight, and it contains a lot of energy. So for reliability and safety issues, for financing issues, this is going to be regionally organized.
Yes, thank you very much, Wang.
Yeah, so with respect to that question, I think market has its nature that is chasing the efficiency and return itself, right? So as Professor Lamy mentioned, then as the capital goes in with the nature of being after these ESG-friendly companies, actually it helps those more ESG-friendly company to grow, right? So the market will regulate that to the extent that, okay, now everybody wanted to be in that area because that's where the market will grow. So that's a short question other than the government regulatory framework I mentioned.
Thank you very much, Markus.
Well, let me put the things a little bit in perspective. I mean, number one, I fully agree with Pascal that let's say the complementarity of our two markets and the business reality gives us all reason to continue to cooperate. At the same time, of course, I mean, Europe is under the, let's say, under the deep impression of what the energy dependency, specifically gas, on Russia means. Therefore, obviously, the debates on strategic autonomy are growing. I mean, Business Europe is amongst those acknowledging that you also need to think about strategic sourcing, but we're the ones always underlining that we need to be open. So we call this an open strategic autonomy and open technological autonomy, meaning that we need to continue to cooperate. Just to put this in perspective. I think Pascal has also said, and rightly so, that we need to continue to cooperate. At the same time, and underlining what Kurt has said, the business logic is still a different one. I mean, our friends from the EU Chamber of Commerce, they publish a very good study every year asking all the investors on the ground. We are sometimes the partner to present this in Brussels, asking the investors on the ground, what is your view in China? 2 years ago, there was still more companies wanting to increase their investments than to decrease. I think last year, we for the first time had a little bit of a change of trend, but it still stays on a huge level. So the business logic says we need to cooperate. And back to your questions, I mean, I think the standards are a necessary prerequisite. Also for what my friend has said on the financial markets. Because if we are not defining what does green mean, what does sustainable mean, what does carbon neutral mean, we will not be able to cooperate in the way we should cooperate. Kurt will not get what he needs to prove that what he gets there in his value chain is green, and we will have different views on what is green investment and what is green financing.
Yeah, thank you very much. Guido, I know that you want to react on Markus, no, but I have a question.
I'm quoting his study, but it's a useful one.
I have read your remarks. And you left out one aspect that I cherish very much, and that is the holistic approach. That we cannot do it without a holistic approach. When I was running the car industry, when we were talking about CO2 emissions, everything, integrated approach, holistic approach, everybody has to contribute, was there. Can you develop a little bit on it? And then you had something else.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank Markus for making advertising our position paper, business confidence survey. Thank you very much. And one word on the standards. We do see the risk of standards bifurcation, not only in energy, but in many industrial sectors, and it would be a disaster for the future cooperation. And the bifurcation is happening mainly for Chinese position. About holistic approach. This is the achieving carbon neutrality requires, without a holistic approach, we cannot drive the pathway towards neutrality. I keep an example that Kurt did about energy vehicle, electrical vehicles. In China, because 68% of electricity is produced by coal, and because the electricity market is not transparent, so consumers cannot decide which kind of source of electricity to be purchased, as a matter of fact, the carbon footprint of 1 kilometer of electrical vehicle in China is worse than natural gas, unfortunately. So today, exactly. What we are advocating is the Chinese government is to see the perspective from a bigger standpoint. from a holistic standpoint, intertwining all the possible solutions and technologies, contributing together towards carbon neutrality. A single technology will not solve a problem.
I fully agree, and thank you for saying that. I have a last question I would like to ask you in 30 seconds. One of you has said, and it was you, Guido, have said that today we are in a situation where we have problem with energy security, and we prefer, put emphasis on energy security. Is this going to slow down the process of decarbonization? I start with Markus.
No, I think there's two aspects. It will speed up renewables, and I hope that we will finally work up and understand that if it takes 7 years to set up a windmill and all these kind of things, we will never get there. So, of course, in the short term, we might have some necessity to fire coal, but I think this will be totally matched by speeding up the transition by mere necessity of becoming independent from certain external sources.
So we will probably have to postpone the short-term goals, but on a long term, it's going to be beneficial.
Well, I don't think we need to postpone them. We might not reach them every year, but I think on the medium run, I mean, this will be more than outplayed and overplayed by the speeding up of the transition, the necessary speeding.
Good.
Same view. We also have the feeling that things are accelerating. And it's going to be probably painful the next 2-3 years, but you never make an omelette without breaking the eggs.
Well,
yeah, I think that I agree. Actually, from a perspective of finance, right? So if you think about what happened this year in Europe, if you installed a solar panel on your roof, you are taking on a swap contract with a fixed price on the electricity, right? So essentially, you are hedging yourself. So that would accelerate the process instead of decelerating it. And in China, of course, independence means that you rely less on external gas or other sources. So I think I agree with the panelists.
Thank you. Zhang from Shanghai.
Yes, I think for short term, I agree. But for long term, I think people are still looking for new energy. But in China, it's a different story because we have a lot of advantage. We are more listen to the government, follow the government's charge. That's my answer. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you on this remark. Is there anybody else from Shanghai that would like to ask a question to the panelists? The last one.
Just wanted from some policy perspective, and I think Marcus raised a very valid point in terms of permitting. So just want to know from the European side what is being done. As per Repower Europe, you have 3 times the target of what is installed base, reaching up to 1200 gigawatts from currently about 400 gigawatts. In Spain now it takes 2.5 years to reach one project from a planning to RTB, ready to build stage. In Italy, 2.5 years. So with this kind of, the permitting is going to be bottleneck for getting the energy security or the Repower Europe 2030 goals. So what is being done at a policy level to speed up this entire permitting process?
Okay, thank you very much, Marcus. I think we'll have you on.
No, very rapidly. I think the Repower EU, this is a very good step. Of course, now we need to implement it rapidly, because I mean we are simply too slow in Europe in getting the projects done, and this is due to procedures. And I'll take Kurt's picture. We will not be able to do this without breaking eggs. And this is what I also tell politicians. I mean, we need to speed up, but this of course means you cannot endlessly discuss with all groups which might have an interest. I mean, I think we need to be as frank as this, because otherwise we'll not be able to speed up as we need to speed up, and we need to get these things done in a year max, which is written down in this paper, but now we need to get it done and implemented.
Any short, urgent remark to this? No. Thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists, both here and in Shanghai. Let's give them a big hand. Obviously, we could stay here for a long time, discuss it the whole afternoon. But thank you very much. And I will now, if you take your places, and I will now ask the Dean of the CEIBS, Ding Yong, to deliver closing remarks. Thanks a lot. Yong.
I will try to be extremely short. I'm the host from CEIBS side, on-site here in Brussels. So again, I just want to extend our welcome and our thanks for your commitment to this important event. As we already mentioned at the beginning, we have been doing that every year, most of them, of course, offline before COVID, online during COVID. Now we are back to offline again. And we will, of course, continue. And every year, as our school is not only the leading business school in Asia or in mainland China, but also we are constructed by EU and Shanghai government as the bridge, the very few bridge these days between China and Europe. And we are extremely committed to interaction, exchange, and globalization, like Professor Lamy mentioned very well. So welcome again. Thank you for your attendance. And of course, thanks to our partner in Brussels. And without them, we couldn't make it happen like today, both in impact and in scale. So I want to invite my partner, Gran, on the stage and let her give her closing remark. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for your engagement today. I found the discussions both very useful and engaging. It was also an honor to organize this 8th EU-China Forum on Decarbonization together with our long-term partner, the China-Europe Business School. And I also wish to congratulate CEIBS as its MBA program has ranked in the top 25 of the Financial Times annual Global Business School rankings for 18 consecutive years. As China is relaxing the COVID-19 policies, foreign students can start again to study these top MBA programs in person in China at CEIBS. And in order to understand China, we really need to be able to be present there and to feel China's dynamic and fast-changing business environment. People-to-people exchanges in person are essential in all fields: academic, research, government, business, and so on. We also hope that next year, the 4th EU-China High-Level Environment and Climate Dialogue can be held in person in order to deepen the EU-China Green Partnership. As mentioned today, the EU and China both share a commitment towards green development and better global governance on climate change. It is clear that both sides need each other. We all know that China is the EU's biggest trading partner. Trade and climate are also increasingly intertwined. Trade flows cause transport emissions, and they help to disseminate emission-intensive goods and practices. But trade flows can also help you to speed up the use of these climate-friendly technologies. Carbon neutrality, as we know, is also a key priority of the Chinese government, and China, as we heard many times, is committed to reach peak carbon dioxide emissions by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. These dual carbon goals open up further opportunities for cooperation between the EU and China on a government and business level. European companies lead on decarbonization. They have the expertise and experience and can contribute to China's carbon goals. As we all know, the EU's aim is to be carbon neutral by 2050. There is a huge potential for cooperation, as we heard already today, but also in a long list of diverse fields, such as green automobiles, digital technology, big data technology, AI, renewable energy, the Internet of Things, circular economy, smart grid, carbon capture and storage, battery and storage technology, green investment and standards, and so many more. Also, according to the decarbonization report of the EUCC in China, which has been mentioned several times and which I strongly recommend, the report finds that 70% of European companies operating in China are already pursuing carbon neutrality, and 40% have established focused decarbonization teams. Promoting a low carbon culture and creating corporate and consumer awareness will also be key to China and the EU achieving its carbon neutrality aspirations. I would like to end here and thank you all for your participation, and I hope we can continue these very interesting discussions with well-known experts. We will also keep you informed on our next actions, because I think that's the word, on EU-China decarbonization. As said, we need to speed up and have a holistic approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gwen. And I would like to ask now the president of CEIBS to deliver the closing remarks from China. Professor Wang.
Thank you. I would like to thank our partner,
Thank you.
the president of the EU-China Business Association, for his support. And also I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the speakers. A big thank you to all the business community as well as professors and the guests who attended today's forum. I would like to express my thanks to all the people behind the scenes and journalists in Brussels as well as in Shanghai. Secondly, the experts have all talked about the problems, difficulties, and the challenges that we face. And it may be a very difficult job for everyone, but there are many opportunities for cooperation. We must look at long term, be able to see common ground while preserving differences both at the government level and business community level to increase cooperation. We feel that indeed, just as our friends have said, China is a big market for the European Union, and the cooperation between China and the EU has great prospects. We should have confidence to work together. This market is very broad, and we saw that in July this year, the trade volume between China and the EU increased by 8.9%, accounting for nearly 13.7% of our total trade. The trade volume between China and the EU, even the growth rate exceeded the United States. This is a very good momentum. Our experts have proposed a lot of technical standards for carbon emissions, financial systems for carbon emission reduction, green finance, and the expansion of carbon trading market, the transparency of the policy, the timetable for promotion, how both sides can implement each other's strengths. I think with the strategic plan of the government, mutual trust between the Chinese government and the EU, we can eliminate the negative impact of geopolitics. The only way to make the world a better place than the global village a safer place is to unite sincerely and to achieve real environmental and atmospheric protection. We believe that with a forum like ours, we can advocate, promote, propose, and act together. Let's take action to achieve the goal of carbon peak and carbon neutrality tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Wang, for these almost concluding words. I would like to, at the end, wrap up a little bit the discussion with picking up some of the buzzwords that came during the speeches, during the speech of Pascal Lamy and during the debate. There is absolutely no doubt that we need to enhance the cooperation, that we have to continue and not only continue, but again, enhance it. We have our differences, but we have also our similarities. And there are certain preferences, there are certain areas that were mentioned by Pascal Lamy on which we should definitely cooperate. Public-private partnership and financial markets, extremely important, and we have to look at it as well. We may not forget the integration of the financial markets. Global solutions. Global solutions have been advocating in many areas, and they are extremely important also, and maybe especially in the area of decarbonization. We have to start working on global regulation and global standards. We have started in some areas. I think that it was clear from the panelists, from what has been said, that global solutions and a holistic approach is absolutely essential. The problem of energy security, which is today looming over us and which is almost dominating the debate in Europe, will probably slow down a little bit the speed of decarbonization, slow down the plan of the Green Deal at the beginning, but the targets in 2035, 2050, and in China after that in 2060 should not be endangered by this situation. That has been underlined by all the speakers. Yes, we are living difficult times, but yes, we all agree that we should continue this cooperation, but we should also enlarge it. Pascal Lamy has mentioned global cooperation. The word WTO has been mentioned only once, and we should work also in the framework of the WTO, and we should bring into the debate the most important players and start to make sure that the business community that has sometimes a slightly different view than the politicians in inverted commas should drive forward the solutions. There is absolutely no doubt about this. The last but least, I was happy to hear what Pascal has said. We need the CEIBS. The CEIBS plays a role, and similar institutions do play a role as well in this process. And it's not only by providing the platform; it's more than that. And you have seen that many alumni. We had one of them with us in the debate, are today playing a leading role in the industries. So we are coming to the end of this forum. I would like to thank you all for being with us. I would like to thank, as it has been done already, the CEIBS, the EU-China Business Association, and everybody involved. I have seen how much work it is to prepare such a forum. It is enormous. And so everybody who was working behind the scenes, thank you very much. So thank you very much. Thanks all of you. Thank you for coming. And I'm looking very much forward to seeing you at the next forum, hopefully next year. And we will continue this discussion. So thanks a lot and have a nice afternoon.